Elizabeth Siders, the mother of 16 children accused of hiding her children and causing them serious harm, wants out of jail. But the prosecutor says Elizabeth should stay put. I'll tell you all of the reasons why. I'm Anjanette Levy, and this is Crime Fix.
Court filing, Vinton County Common Pleas Court, August 17th, 2026. The line reads like paperwork. It isn't. The defendant is facing multiple serious pending charges, and thus is a flight risk and a potential risk to the victims in this case. The defendant is the mother. The victims are her own 16 children. Picture a single room, 12 feet by 12 feet. Now picture 16 children having lived inside that footprint for years. That's the entire case in one image. A family of 18 people compressed into a space smaller than most American living rooms. Everything the prosecutor writes, everything the defense argues, everything the grand jury is about to decide, radiates out from that one room. Before we go deeper into what the records actually show, make sure you're subscribed to the Crime Infinity, because we don't just cover the story, we follow the evidence. Here's what's on paper so far. On June 30th, 2026, deputies in Hamden, Ohio pulled 16 children out of a home belonging to the Siders family. 4 adults were arrested that day. Gary Siders Sr., 73, the grandfather, Christina Siders, 67, the grandmother, Gary Siders Jr., 36, the father, and Elizabeth Siders, 33, the mother. Each was charged with 16 counts of child endangering, 1 count per child, all second-degree felonies. 7 of the children needed hospital care. 2 were flown out to trauma centers. That detail alone tells you this wasn't a routine welfare check gone bad. This was tree-off. Elizabeth Siders has been sitting in the southeastern Ohio Regional Jail since the day of the arrest.
Elizabeth Siders has been in jail since June 30th, going on 2 months now, and she wants out. Who wouldn't? Elizabeth's attorney has asked the judge to modify her bail, but the prosecutor has now responded in writing, and William Archer is essentially saying, not so fast, Judge. Keep her in. And his reasons for that are interesting, to say the very least. I'm going to go through all of this for you. Elizabeth's husband, Gary Siders Jr., and her mother-in-law, Christina Siders, are still in jail too. Christina Siders' lawyer has also asked that she be released on bail. Gary Siders Sr. is out of jail on a signature bond. The 73-year-old grandfather was released from jail because he has a serious medical condition. And since he was in jail, the county would have been responsible for.
Her bond is set at $300,000, cash or surety. Her attorney says she can't pay it. And in early July, he filed a motion asking the court to knock it down to a signature bond, release her on her own word, strap a GPS monitor to her ankle, and let the case play out from outside a cell. It's a reasonable ask on its face. Plenty of defendants get exactly that. Here's the ticking clock question, because this is where the story stops being a headline and starts being a countdown. What does a prosecutor know that makes him say no to a mother who hasn't been convicted of anything yet? On August 17th, Vinton County Prosecutor William Archer filed his answer, and it wasn't a courtesy no. He laid out, in writing, on the record, that Elizabeth Siders is a flight risk and a potential risk to the victims in this case.
Deny the bond modification for several reasons. First, the defendant is facing multiple serious pending charges, multiple F2s involving serious physical harm to her children, and thus is a flight risk and a potential risk to the victims in this case. Second, the defendant has filed a competency motion. Consequently, she is at personal risk until her competency is known. Third, the defendant has new serious felony charges that will be considered by the grand jury. Did you catch that last part? William Archer wrote that Elizabeth Siders has new serious felony charges that will be considered by the grand jury. That sounds like those charges are in addition to the 16 child endangering charges she already faces. Judge Rogers has already ordered a competency evaluation for Elizabeth Siders at the request of her lawyer. The evaluation will also include an evaluation to determine whether Elizabeth Siders has a mental illness that would make her not guilty by reason of insanity. Tommy Stolley had said previously that Elizabeth Siders wants to be released from jail so she can be reunited with her children, but that seems highly unlikely to happen anytime soon. Vinton County is actually seeking permanent custody of the children.
Translation, for anyone who doesn't speak legalese. He thinks that if she walks out of that jail, she runs, or she reaches the kids. Both. He also noted that her own attorney had filed a competency motion on her behalf, which means before anyone even gets to guilt or innocence, the court now has to determine whether Elizabeth Siders is mentally fit to stand trial at all, and whether she qualifies for a not guilty by reason of insanity evaluation.
Yeah, good to see you. I'm really interested in your thoughts on this prosecutor, William Archer, coming out after all of these weeks and weeks after these requests for bail modifications were filed, and saying, we oppose any bail modification for these three reasons. And the first reason being, one of the three reasons he gave for Elizabeth Siders, at least, was the fact that the issue of her competency has been raised. What do you make of that?
Well, I think first, in order to do a competency exam, the psychologists like to control the location and have it in a controlled setting. And if she was released on bond, too, there's no assurance that she would meet the examiner at the time and place identified. So examiners like to interview the suspect and give them any tests, psychological or otherwise, while they're in the county jail. If they're going to be released on bond later, that's up to the court. But I think they prefer that controlled atmosphere.
As things stand right now, we know what we know. We know that the 16 children were taken from the house on June 30th. We know that that three of the adults remain in jail. The children are in therapeutic foster care. This prosecutor knows a whole heck of a lot more than we do. He knows the inner workings of the investigation, what brought them there in the first place. He is calling Elizabeth a flight risk. Her attorney, on the other hand, has said that she doesn't have any money. She can't post bail, so you should just let her out and put a GPS bracelet on her. So is there maybe something this prosecutor is hearing on jail calls that she's might be saying to family members that's really raising his concern that she could potentially flee?
That's not a footnote. That's a second, parallel legal track running underneath the first one. And then there's the line that turns this from a bond hearing into something bigger. Archer telling the court that Elizabeth Siders is facing additional, more serious charges that haven't been filed yet. Charges he intends to bring in front of a Vinton County grand jury. Not confirmed, not indicted, not proven, but telegraphed in an official filing by the man running the prosecution. When a prosecutor shows his hand before the grand jury even convenes, it's rarely because the case is getting smaller. 16 counts of child endangering already assume neglect at scale, failure to provide a safe environment, failure to protect from serious physical harm, repeated over 16 children. What Archer is signaling is that the state believes there's more sitting underneath those 16 counts.
Decades in prison, and that's enough motive to flee, or at least for the state to argue that she has a reason to flee.
William Archer also said that Elizabeth is a potential risk to the victims in this case. Now, these potential victims, the 16 children ranging in age from age 18 to 1.5, they're all in therapeutic foster care. So you would hope that, she's not going to be able to learn their location since she is accused of endangering the children. But this is interesting to me that a prosecutor thinks she's a potential risk to their safety after her lawyer, Tommy Stolley, has said publicly, like, she wants to be reunited with her children. She loves her children. She's getting care packages at the jail, and she's asking, can I give this stuff to my kids? So it sounds to me like there's a lot here under the surface that we don't know about. When you read between the lines of this, what does it say to you?
Well, I think just by virtue of the fact that she is suggesting she wants reunited with the children, that should she be released, that she might make a effort to have contact with them. Obviously, the placements for the children would not be known, but given the whole very bizarre circumstances surrounding this case, they probably.
More specific, more severe. And he's not required to tell the public what that is until the grand jury acts, which means, right now, every viewer of this video knows exactly as much as the record allows, and not one fact more. Compare that to the grandmother.
So Grandma, Christina, William Archer says, we have not 3 reasons like we do with Elizabeth to oppose a bail modification for her, but we have 2 reasons. And the first is a similar reason. It says she's facing multiple serious pending charges, the F2s for child endangering involving serious physical harm to the grandchildren, and thus is a flight risk. So he's saying Grandma is also a potential flight risk and a potential risk to the victims in this case.
And at least it seems to me that the same rules apply to all of them, except perhaps maybe the grandfather, who seems to have sufficient mental health issues that he may not share the same kind of either flight risk or threat of harm to the victims or witnesses. But it seems to me that all of them are facing decades as a potential prison sentence. And they're also on notice that the state is going to seek permanent custody of the children. So when you ask yourself, what reason do they have to stick around looking at decades in prison, there's very few reasons that they have to stick around.
Christina Siders' attorney filed the same kind of motion, reduce her bond, let her go home with a monitor. Archer opposed that too, but notice what's missing from his objection to her release. No mention of new charges. No warning of a bigger indictment coming. Just the standard flight risk language that applies to all 4 defendants. That's not an accident in a legal filing. Prosecutors don't leave out threats by mistake. They leave them out because they don't have them. Whatever Archer believes happened inside that room, right now, on paper, he's treating the parents as the center of it and the grandparents as orbiting it. The grandfather, meanwhile, isn't even in jail anymore. Gary Siders Sr. was released on a signature bond after collapsing on his way to a bond hearing and being diagnosed with a serious medical condition, one severe enough that keeping him incarcerated would have shifted his medical costs onto Vinton County, a county small enough that the bill risked becoming a real financial problem for the government itself. A judge has also ordered a competency evaluation for him, the same kind Elizabeth is now undergoing, to determine both his fitness to stand trial and whether an insanity defense could apply. So of the 4 adults arrested June 30th, 1 is home on medical grounds, 2 remain in custody fighting for release, and 1, the mother, is the only one the prosecutor has publicly flagged for additional, unspecified charges. This was never just poverty. That's the phrase the defense keeps circling back to in public comments, that the family was simply poor, living below the radar, avoiding children's services out of fear rather than malice. It's a real defense, and it's not automatically false. But Vinton County isn't asking for temporary custody of these 16 children. It's asking for permanent custody, not while we investigate.
Very much restricted. All those things add up to an equation of a long-standing neglect and abuse that, below the radar, should add up to something more than what we know.
I don't know what other charges she could be facing. I don't want to speculate here, but I think that, it goes without saying, the prosecutors already publicly said, these children were hidden. I mean, he said that to the county commissioners in a meeting. They were the hidden children of Omer Street. He likes that a TV station calls them that. And the county is seeking permanent custody. There's not going to be any reunification. If the county is saying to the courts, we're seeking permanent custody of these children, I think that is signaling that this is incredibly serious and reunification is unlikely.
I think you're exactly correct. This case, ordinarily, this kind of case, even though this is a case of its own, exclusive kind, A case like this starts with a request for temporary custody to children's
Correct.
services, either on an emergency basis or otherwise. And then you do an investigation, you see what you have, and then you look at the family unit and look at relatives or others that the child might be placed at. But here they're starting off right from the get go, seeking permanent custody, which, again, as you say, says to everyone concerned that we don't think reunification with the parents of these children, the way they've been treated, is ever going to be in the best interest of those children.
And that's the legal standard in the state of Ohio, is the best interest of the child. It is
Not until conditions improve. Permanent. In child welfare law, that word doesn't get used lightly, and it doesn't get used first. Ordinarily, a county starts with emergency temporary custody, does the investigation, evaluates relatives as placements, and only escalates to permanent custody if reunification looks impossible. Vinton County skipped the ordinary sequence and went straight to permanent. This was never just poverty. So here's where the record actually leaves us, with nothing invented and nothing assumed. Elizabeth Siders is still in jail, still waiting on a judge to rule on her bond motion, still undergoing a competency evaluation whose outcome could reroute her entire prosecution. Christina Siders is in the same jail, facing the same opposition, minus the warning of new charges. Gary Siders Jr. has a separate, additional case, 4 counts of public indecency, tied to the original warrant that brought deputies to that house in the first place, moving through the docket on its own timeline. And Gary Siders Sr. is home, medically fragile, waiting like everyone else to see what a Vinton County grand jury decides, likely before Labor Day. According to the timeline, courts in Ohio typically follow once a case is bound over from municipal to common pleas court. This was never just poverty.
in most states, I believe, what is in the best interest of the child. And there must be some evidence that we are not privy to that goes beyond these are just poor people living in extreme poverty, because that's what a couple of the defense attorneys have said thus far. They're just poor. They're living in extreme poverty. Ron, they're not in school. They're not going to school. They're moving around to avoid children's services. Does this not signal to you that this goes beyond just being impoverished?
Certainly. I think there's
The unanswered question isn't whether Elizabeth Siders loves her children. Even the prosecutor hasn't disputed that. The unanswered question is what, specifically, the state believes happened inside that 12 by 12 room for long enough, and severely enough, that a prosecutor would rather show his hand early than risk her walking free before the grand jury convenes. If you want to read the record yourself instead of taking anyone's word for it, including mine, search Vinton County Common Pleas Court for the state's memorandum in opposition to bond modification, filed August 17, 2026, case involving Elizabeth Siders. It's public. Read what Archer actually wrote, and then answer this in the comments. Do you think the state is building toward charges against Elizabeth Siders specifically, or against the family as a whole? If this breakdown helped you understand what's actually in the filings instead of just the headlines, like this video, share it, subscribe, and turn on notifications for the crime infinity. We'll be back the moment that grand jury moves.